Hello, and welcome back to the Cybersecurity Advisors, or CyAN, series of video conversations with CyAN members, information security stakeholders, and other persons of interest around the industry and the economy. My name is John Solomon, and I'm here today with Joe Cozzupoli. He's a fairly recent joiner to CyAN. We were very happy to have him here. A senior information security advisor at Microsoft in Australia. So we're, truly spanning the globe again. And today we're here to talk about artificial intelligence. And as a reminder, Cybersecurity Advisors Network is a global not-for-profit community of trusted information security professionals, whether consultants or managers or technicians, around the board, across the board, in all manners of disciplines and areas of expertise. If you'd like to have a look at what we do a lot of community service, a lot of not-for-profits and general benefit initiatives, mentorship, etc., please give us a visit at cybersecurityadvisors.network, and I'll put the link to our website in the description of this video and the podcast for those of you joining us on audio. The conversation today was based on a blog post that Joe wrote recently for the CyAN blog, cybersecurityadvisors.network/blog, funny enough. And I'll link to that as well. And the conversation was around balancing privacy and security in AI. And based on that, since ChatGPT and OpenAI are burning topics nowadays, obviously, as well as a growing understanding of not only privacy but also risk management, we thought it would be a good opportunity to share some of Joe's thoughts, some discussion on the topic, to stimulate some discussion, hopefully, around how this rapidly evolving topic will shape our business environments, technology, regulation, good practice, and other areas of how we deal with AI. So Joe, welcome. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself and give us some ideas about who you are, what you do, and why we're talking about AI today?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Joe Cozzupoli. I work for Microsoft. I'm a security advisor, senior security advisor, whatever my title is. I'm down in Sydney, Australia. I'm very happy to be a member of CyAN, very proud to be a member of CyAN, and just wanted to share some thoughts on the recent blog I wrote on balancing security and privacy when using AI systems. So, happy to talk. I mean, this all came about, or was that I was at the Gartner Security Risk Summit a couple of weeks ago in Sydney. And I had a couple of 4-hour conversations with a bunch of CISOs there, and the whole AI and private data, corporate data came up.
Excellent. Now, InfoSec, as we all know, is often very heavily and unfortunately driven by buzzwords. And whether it's cloud, whether it's DevOps, whether it's quantum encryption, AI is I think this year's champion, at least for the first half of 2023. And everything recently has been OpenAI, Gen AI, but also interpretive AI. And so one of the big concerns, not only because of an OpenAI data breach not so long ago, was exposure of confidential data via AI platforms. You in your article, you talk about concepts like data minimization, right? Now, to me, none of this is new. None of this is exotic. We have exactly the same issue with Google Translate. People pasting corporate document contents into external services. We have a lot of, work that's gone to DLP over the past few years. What should we be paying attention to as not only users of let's say external AI services, but also organizations where we don't necessarily formally have any external AI or contracts or whatever. We don't own a chat GPT API license, but people are going to use it anyway, right? So what are some concepts in terms of ensuring data hygiene, ensuring that people aren't irresponsibly pasting information into a random, whether it's OpenAI or others, that they don't control?
And I think that's the key point. It's not like their own in-house tool where they're assured that the data is staying with them in their boundaries, right? It's about, having that problem without education and doing those audits and probably, educating the staff to say, look, I know you need to reply to this email and you don't know what to say. And it's got a lot of data in it. There might be an attached spreadsheet in there that has some data, and it could be corporate data, could be, client data, unfortunately. And they want to just do a quick summary of that to put in a PowerPoint to share with their board or shared with a third party. So in that sense, data is leaving the organization, even if the open AIs and all the AI tools out there say, your data staying local, it's staying within your browser. We're not using it to learn. Like the platform isn't learning from your data. It's still about, well, that data is leaving the premises, and do you have those permissions? So I think there needs to be some kind of regulation of coming around that. And again, that's all about, education. And it's the data minimization is a big thing. And yes, it has been around for a long time. And, then the flip side of that is, well, you can't get any good data out of that minimized data, if you know what I mean. So again, AI systems need more data so then it can give you better results. But it's about, understanding what to do with it and what not to do with it. And I think that it always comes down to the user and who is doing that at that time.
So as a very, very casual user, that sounds pretty bad. I take issue with the idea that it's not learning. I'll give you an anecdotal example. I mentioned when we were talking before, I use it to summarize European legislative proposals. And unless you have an API key, it's not able to really reliably parse, for example, EU or Lex articles, which are the repository of European regulations and proposed regulations. But obviously, somebody has taken the effort to go ahead and train it on certain high-profile regulations, whether European or American. I was able to, for example, get a very, very good summary of the MiCA, or Markets in Crypto Assets Directive that's proposed right now. But trying to get one on the European Cyber Resilience Act actually got it to interpret random other European regulations on things like COVID response, things like environmental, emergency measures, but absolutely nothing what I was not what I was looking for. So it is learning, obviously, from something or somebody, but I'm not quite sure what. And I think part of the issue here is that we don't have any transparency on what is being fed to it, but what it's doing with that to start creating its basis for interpretation and content.
Yeah, and what it already actually has, because I know if you say ChatGPT, it says it only knows up to 2021, I think it is, and it doesn't know anything after that. But then today I asked it about IRAP, and the Australian government, cloud policy, right? So it actually spat it out. So it's like, okay, well, IRAP's been around, but so it is that transparency that's what's needed to kind of know what it's doing. You can actually train it within a conversation, right? I don't know if you've done that, but you can actually say, can you tell me this in a different way? Can you summarize it further? Can you expand on that? Now, if I give you this other link, can you go and, change your response to be more aligned with this article or this document? And it will. So you can actually train it within that single conversation. But then apart from that, it doesn't actually learn again. But then I do hear that if you're using, you got to create an account on ChatGPT, for an example. So it does actually look at all your history, and you are kind of training in that instance, but you're not training it for others and what they tell us.
I think
so. Yeah. So again, it's about, without that transparency, we can't go back to some basis, another buzzword, zero trust.
One of the comments that a colleague of mine made initially, that was my original response as well, was that, well, it's actually really exactly the same. We don't need extra regulation. It's just another computer. So we should treat this exactly the same as, GDPR and cloud services, whether SaaS or organically cloud hosted. And while yes, the fundamental concepts, everything that you talk about here in your post, transparency, accountability, audits, right, zero trust, etc., that applies everywhere. But at this time, there are aspects of this that the very, very nature of again, not just Gen AI, but general AI, it creates a new set of paradigms that need to be addressed.
Oh, yes.
So while
AI is a different world, right? Sorry, but AI is like fundamentally different to anything we've ever done. And it's moving at, phenomenal speeds, right? Microsoft has tools they released, 3 weeks ago, a month ago. Google released some stuff last week. It's a big race between everyone, and then who knows who else is going to come in, all right? So yeah, we need to take those principles that we're talking about and what I talk about in my article from information security and cybersecurity in general, and uplift them into AI. And I think that we'll need their own separate regulations, and there will be like clauses needed in GDPR specific to AI. Yeah.
The way the EU is going about this, and I somebody shared on LinkedIn a while ago an article from the Brookings Institution, which I sent you, which in my view is the best comparison between the US and the EU regulatory approach to AI, where the US one being very, very industry specific, agency restricted, very kind of inconsistent, whereas the EU one tends to be more systematic, slow.
Yes.
And when you say updating GDPR, what it actually does is it doesn't try to update existing regulations, but takes things like GDPR and things like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights even as a set of fundamental principles and builds up on that. And I know you mentioned that in Australia this is still under discussion, even though that also that this kind of more fundamental topic of data privacy has had a discussion going on for a very, very long time in other jurisdictions as well. So what are some of the regulatory, let's say, enhancements and AI specific uplifts, as you call them, that we can expect to see around the world in terms of ensuring that these fundamental rules and frameworks are applied adequately to AI systems?
I would suggest, now that we've got, a chief privacy officer, there could be a similar role to do with like an AI type of lead, or maybe not specific area, I'm more like a technology or data lead type thing, because I think it needs to come top down in the organization, and they need to, it obviously always needs to be looked after internally, and then obviously having regulatory compliance and the agencies doing that too. They have the external audits, but it definitely needs to be internally audited big time. And especially, we have APRA for the financial institutes here in Australia. They would need to conform and keep up with it, because at that Gartner conversation, the size of those could do from the big banks in Australia. So and they were very concerned. So yeah, it needs to be coming top down, internal audit, number one, enhance your security policies, your governance, your GRC around AI and the use of data, corporate or client and or corporate client, everything, right? So, yeah.
I think it seems to me that one of the main concerns, whether it is a web service, free or subscribed to like ChatGPT, or something that's built into one of your internal capabilities or contracted, whether you have an MSP or you have an solution, the main concern for me is the lack of transparency in the mechanics of what it is doing, what is storing, what is doing with what you feed it. And I think this rapid revolution, yes, but also very rapid evolution that you're talking to of capabilities is something that where I think a company needs to consider the what's the term I'm looking for? Not zero trust, but assuming that maybe the AI isn't going to do something malicious with that data or wrong, but simply treat
the unknown. It's the unknown.
The unknown. It's the unknown unknowns, essentially, to create a horrible, to quote, horrible person, right? So how can again, going from this idea that fundamentally it's nothing new in terms of you're feeding data, potentially confidential, regulated, whatever data or information, to essentially a black box, but that black box will then actually do stuff with it, unlike previous iterations of for example, cloud services or web services. How can organizations adapt their education, their messaging internally? You mentioned data protection officer, you mentioned updating their privacy policies to ensure that they understand this risk from, you are feeding stuff into something that may act unpredictably with confidential data.
It's like the similar way we have awareness in organizations around data loss prevention. All right. So I think it needs to be taken into that level, and further on enhanced on that to do with AI tools. And, you can't send corporate information over email to someone external, right? And they can have, the organization might buy tools from a vendor to, automatically block that. But then, enhance that again, we talk about ChatGPT, but I'm an Apple user, so I don't know about the Android store, but if you go on an Apple App Store, you type in AI, there's hundreds of apps you can use that just have the API key or GPT-4, all right? You can pay subscription, you can pay one off, so you can use that. It doesn't have to be on your browser, right? So you can actually have it with you in your pocket, which is a little more dangerous, right? So, because it stores all your history, and it shares it across iOS.
And not just
ecosystem.
It's yet another point of
another
failure, but suspicion, essentially.
Yeah. So again, it's that unknown. So it's I think us vendors, because I'm in a vendor now, we need to consider that in our tools, in our product design, to help organizations. But then organizations themselves have to take on that responsibility and have it in their policies, have education, awareness, training around that. So, just because you can get ChatGPT or AI tool to, get you a recipe for something for dinner or what to write in a birthday card, right? It's different to, I need to send an email to my boss, or whatever about these clients, and here's their information, here is their ticket information of what's happened, their history, and yes, it'll send you a nice email, but now that data is in that tool, and that's the same essentially as sending data to a competitor or sending data out externally, and the other person on the other end has an unsecure or has malware on their device and it's gone, right? So it's the same type of mindset. I think, again, it's a mindset shift we need to take around that. And, I know, like you said about Europe and US, and yes, I've got to read that article again. It's been very busy. Italy's blocked ChatGPT. Germany are talking about it as well. I think it's just going to go up to the EU, and they're going to decide what they're going to do in terms of enhancing GDPR in some sense around it.
Well, if you look at the, I mean, I'm very, very strong on EU regulation, not so much in other countries in topics like privacy. And if you look at the EU, the EU AI Act, I believe it's called, not strong enough, obviously, to remember the names of the damn laws. One of the things it introduces is again, it doesn't seek to amend GDPR, but it seeks to introduce conceptual controls such as additional, to your point about a privacy officer, additional human review, right? Seeks to mandate applying concepts such as what is PID, what is critical data, whether it's medical, whether it's air traffic control systems, whether it's financial customer account data, and it introduces non-technical control requirements for ensuring that what is going into ChatGPT or OpenAI or whatever AI and what is coming out of it is actually handled right. The same thing, it mandates, for example, quality controls on AI-based analytics or social media quality comment, for example, moderation of social media sites. So a lot of these seem to be not technical controls, but more kind of from the policy and processes on how it's handled.
Yep, I think, and that's and that's how I talk to clients. I'm like, our tools, our platforms are there to enhance what you should be doing internally, and fill the gaps, right? But you should always have something obviously internally. You need that people, process, technology, right? So you need the people definitely on board you to have the policies and then the technology underneath to help. So yeah, it needs to obviously start from there. So but then like we have with shadow IT, right? There's going to be shadow AI.
Yeah, so
we need to be aware.
As you talked initially, one of your first points was education. So again, it's not a technological control. You can have all the DLP controls and restrictions you want to make people's lives miserable, but fundamentally it boils down to: are you ensuring that your users know what's at stake and what the good practices are? And do you have processes in place to avoid downsides from misuse? Now, given that non-technical side, shifting pace, shifting gears a moment, AI is a hugely disruptive technology. It is not by any means the first hugely disruptive technology. I mean, you go back to right, the internet. Now, where would you say are the opportunities for non-policy or process countermeasures, but technological countermeasures using that same disruptive technology to ensure, for example, that your data is not being leaked, your data is not being misused, etc. Can we use interpretive AI, for example, to actually go and help us minimize potential impact? Can we put this in on a leash for our own use, for an organization to, for example, do risk analysis, to go out and proactively see what kind of data their employees are putting into whatever?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say it definitely is, because I mean, like you could teach you an LLM, right, the language, then obviously if the organization or they've purchased from a vendor, that they then have the tools to train it. Yeah, definitely, for sure. Because I mean, even with the standard DLP tools now and our compliance tools now, you tell it, behavioral stuff, you train it that way and say, Joey's allowed to send that email to John. John is a third party, so that's fine. But Joe can't send it to Tony, right? And Joe can send this to Tony, but he can't send that document to Tony. So yeah, definitely there is enhancements for that, and there's we have a tool called Copilot, but it's others are doing that too, right? Where it's there to enhance what you're doing already, and make actually your security team's lives easier. Right? You're kind of training in a conversational way to then go and do your asset discovery, for example. And then based off that, you could do your risk analysis, and then based off that, you have your risk management plan in place. But then also you can again train it to see, what data has been sent out in the last month, and what's the cracks, and how can we normalize that as well. So yeah, so the opportunity for these tools is phenomenal now, because not only we can get these tools to write the code for it, but we can get these tools to fix the code for it, and we can keep it on the leash that way, so it doesn't become the next Skynet, and start being self-aware.
So that was
maybe within the organization, that's obviously a good thing too, for it to be self-aware internally as well.
No, I can't. I'm a horrible failure when it comes to coding. I can't program my way out of a wet paper bag. So I have a thing called Code super cool, because it didn't only, I gave it, generate towers of Hanoi in COBOL, right? Because, why not? And not only generate that, but it has a function that says, explain this code to me.
Yes.
Super good, because it actually explained it in human language, which I understand, and took me through it piece by piece. And so my hope is that this, as you indicate, this support, this crutch, this will not become a panacea, but rather something that will help us be more productive. My concern here is, I science fiction geek, is what's potentially more of a dystopian aspect, right? You mention audits in your blog post.
Yeah.
All right. Part of the issue we touched on earlier is that we simply don't have transparency in how these things work, because even I think the without, you mentioned Skynet, without risk of, without going into whether it's going to become self-aware and self-evolve, which seems like technologically a fun idea, but maybe not so much societally. It seems to me like there's a lot of potential for abuse, less by malicious actors, but simply by AI thinking it's doing the right thing. And for example, you mentioned, controlling who sends what to whom. Yeah. There's always been in any business, in any work or other environment, a lot of wiggle room for humans, for individual rights, based on the fact that you simply can't control people like machines, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Now, on to your point about audit and legal considerations, it's all fine and good if you make laws, right? And but how can you audit those effectively when, for example, your provider is overseas in other jurisdictions? Even if they're in your jurisdiction, how can you audit those if the system that you're auditing is potentially, is it even auditable?
Yeah. And that is something that I think that's a bridge we have to cross. I think it's more about, I think first we need to understand and get that transparency, like you said. And then I think we need to do the education on what you can and can't do with it. And then we obviously need to then be able to have auditable, sorry, mechanisms in place, whether they're tools, whether it's people, whether it's, yes, we love these tools, but use it with human, I don't know what to say. Let it be human driven. Make sure it's human driven, not it's doing it on its own. So that way it is auditable, because it is, okay, well, we know John did that, so let's go see what else John's been doing. Right? Until those tools are in place where we can get it to audit itself.
So
and then that's another conundrum, because then it's looking at itself and it's kind of learning.
But that kind of goes to my point about technological, I don't want to call them countermeasures, the technological controls.
Yeah.
And as silly as it maybe sounds, and I actually had to open up a calculator to make sure I wasn't going insane here. William Gibson wrote Neuromancer 39 years ago now, 1984. And in it, he conceptualizes not only these ideas of the Turing police, which is a dedicated, control, technological and process and capabilities control function to ensure that AIs don't go off the ranch, but actually has battling AIs. Yeah. So again, to this point of can you use an AI to control AI if it's go beyond the capability of the audit function to really to keep an eye on, to keep tabs on? Is that something? Do you see? I mean, you mentioned again data privacy officers before. Do you see, and in what form, whether it's from the Microsoft perspective or your own perspective, this becoming a thing for being AI specific? Somebody whose job is to make sure the AIs don't go off the leash?
I think it might have to be, because we need that human element to control it, because it's going to be like an arms race now, right? We already are in the arms race between two of the big giants, saying who's going to have the better tools and who does it better. So, and you can even compare results if you ask one of the, ChatGPT 3.5 to give you an answer on something, then you ask GPT-4 to give you an answer on something, it's different, right? So then who ordered to? And if you're going to use another tool to audit that tool, then who's right? And again, without the transparency, how do we know? So we need to have that people control and maybe people specific roles. And they don't necessarily have to be technical themselves and write the code and know what algorithms to check and all that. It's more about, again, back down to the people and the use of the data. I think that needs to be controlled and regulated first, and then we can work out auditing of the tools, either AI based or not.
One thing that strikes me as very risky is that we see this time and time again, that a lot of technological innovation is driven not by malice but by unbridled enthusiasm, right?
Yes.
You see this, Silicon Valley, the stereotype is, waterfall testing is go away, old man, it's boring, fail fast, innovate, DevOps, practice, deploy quickly. Well, no, you're actually working for a hospital or a bank or an airline.
You can't fail fast.
Yeah, you can't fail fast. People will die. So there's that naivete that drives a kind of innovation which may run beyond our control. I really like the AI Act's categorization. I'll link to a site called artificialintelligenceact.eu, which basically defines 3 levels of criticality, which each require their own set of controls and regulatory measures. Most critical, obviously, being things like patient data records, right? Medical systems, airlines, etc. To avoid also things like creating social controls like we see in China, right? So facial recognition, etc.
Yeah.
You don't want your recruiters or your employers using AI to deal with CVs in a way that will prejudice, right? The famous case being, which one was it? Was it one of yours, or was it OpenAI that they first tried to train on social media and quickly realizing that was a mistake? There was one.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, it was not.
Yeah,
Out of good CV.
Yeah. No.
This is I think this is a really interesting approach. So we, again, without resorting right off the bat to technological cudgels, we understand what is actually being dealt with before an organization, whether it's the type of data you use, the kind of systems that are controlled, or even the broader context, right? Do you in InfoSec, risk management frameworks and controls catalogs are geared towards more traditional IT, right? Are you seeing in industry a trend in senior management levels to being willing to update these controls systems, these frameworks, etc., with regards to this idea that, well, it's a brave new world we're facing right now? Just conceptually, is this something philosophical that you feel the C-level and the business is open to updating, realizing that there is definitely a risk there from the unknown unknowns?
Yeah, from the C-levels I've talked to, they're concerned. So they would want to know in-house if they need to update their, risk management, and then obviously the broader sense, have frameworks updated for their teams to follow. So yes, definitely. I think that will come. And unfortunately, like everything in our industry, something needs to happen for it to come. Something bad needs to happen. So hopefully we can be smarter than that now, because we won't be. It's not something we can catch like it's just transition to the cloud. Oops, we moved that file server over to the cloud, and the cloud had a backup leak. So sorry, this can actually get out of control quickly.
So you reckon that it is going to take a major incident or a breach or something of that nature to motivate people to really get moving?
That's, I think, just the way we've been. So hopefully it won't. Hopefully we can be ahead of it. But that's what our history is showing us. But hopefully people are wising up around it, and maybe that's one of the points where I was trying to make with my article, just to get that awareness up, that we need to balance that privacy with our need for security. I need to do business, obviously. That's number one. But then we can't just jump on an AI boat blindly. We need to be smart about it. And because it's a big race between the AI giants, we don't need to be following them at that speed. We need to follow the speed of our business, and ensure, society is safe in terms of privacy, data privacy and stuff. So I hope everyone's, and I've seen it, I've heard it too, that, people are wanting to slow down. But then, obviously you get the enthusiasm, like you mentioned earlier, the big enthusiasm wave. I know, let's jump on and let's do it now. And again, that conference where I had those flow conversations, they were talking about their staff just making PowerPoints and sending emails internally, but using corporate data. So they're already concerned around that too. So, yeah.
I'm a big concern of mine is not only the enthusiasm, but also the temptation to let innovation be driven by greed. There's obviously a lot of money potentially in this to be made by somebody who is less scrupulous, and the potential to control that is it being such an opaque set of technologies for the average, even a subject matter expert. I'm personally hopeful, especially based on the EU approach. The same way that I was with the US approach to healthcare data, after HIPAA, because that got ahead of the problem pretty well, and seemed to be fairly informed and thoughtful. Again, not a perfect approach here, but definitely a start. And I look forward to seeing the non-regulatory good practices catch up with the regulation in this case.
Yeah.
All right, that's really good. I appreciate that. So in closing, we're coming up on time. Are there any kind of fundamental concepts or ideas that you want to touch on? Anything that you want to recap? Call to action? Anything around the things that you want to draw attention to?
Yeah, look, I think one of my points I did talk about in my article is one of the best practices is to get privacy by design. So we need to all look into that and ensure we're doing that. And that's, I think, the foundation we can go off. So if we have privacy by design and privacy by mindset in our organizations to, be smart about what tools we're using and just think twice and maybe ask questions, then we will stay ahead of the game and be smarter around that and not have that big event. Right. But then, like you said, with Europe leading the way, that's great because they've done that with the GDPR. And when I say, enhance it, it's more add into it. I'm plugging in AI into that. That's a great foundation already. So yeah, privacy by design, I think, is a big key for me. If we honor that, then we've got a foundation to work from and not be sucked into the race, right? Into the enthusiasm and just be smart about it.
Excellent. I personally, I think the enthusiasm will diminish a little bit, as soon as somebody finds the next big new shiny thing, because that's all.
This is a big toy to be shiny to outshine, though. So that's the thing. Yeah.
Right now, we societally are the dogs from Up, and we see squirrel, everything kind of out the window. In that case, Joe, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time. I will link to Joe's post, his LinkedIn profile, anything else he'd like to share, as well as a couple of supporting websites, documentations. I really encourage people to look through the Brookings Institution comparison of regulatory approaches. And as always, please leave your comments, like, share, subscribe, something like that on YouTube. Please give us a visit at cybersecurityadvisors.network or on LinkedIn, and we'll see you all the next time around. Stay safe and take care. Thanks a lot, Joe. Have a good evening, good night in Sydney, and talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for watching.